Today we're redesigning YouTube Jobs, a cool little job board for all things YouTube. Need an editor? YouTube Jobs. Need a scriptwriter? YouTube Jobs. Need some reassurance that your career isn't going to be swallowed up by an increasingly large scope of AI capabilities in the next decade or so? YouTube Jobs. My goal with this video is not just to redesign YouTube Jobs, but also to explain why the design changes work. And by the end of this video, you should have a solid set of cheat codes to use in your next design project. So let's get going. Okay, so we're gonna challenge ourselves a little bit and not change the colors or typography too much. I'm gonna keep their existing reds and purples, but they're actually using 3 different fonts on the site, which is generally considered a bad practice. Unless you really know what you're doing, it's really easy to break the visual hierarchy with different fonts because one of them will inevitably look a little jarring, and that's usually enough to pull visual attention somewhere you don't want it to be. Also, if you're loading 3 different fonts, the browser is usually going to have to make 3 different requests to get all of those fonts, which is quite bad for page load time. So we'll just use one of their fonts, Poppins, because it's the most flexible and modern of the 3. Now let's actually get in there and start working some magic on the site. Let's, as usual, start with the header. We'll first polish up their logo a little bit and add a splash of color to imply that this is a job board exclusively for services that are associated with YouTube. And then we'll pull in their existing navigation, slap an icon in there, and align it to the left. I'd still like to keep some way of distinguishing new features, so we'll add a little badge to one of the nav items but float it to the top so it doesn't take up as much horizontal space. Now, these items, especially with the icons, look a little too cluttered, squashed off to the left here, so we'll add a little bit of left margin and put a separator in there, which adds a meaningful separation between the logo and the navigation items, and it just feels a lot more clean from the user's perspective. For the user menu, we'll use the standard placeholder image pattern with a low saturation color behind it and some typed initials in front of it, and we'll also use some nice little icons for messages and notifications. Now, it's really important that when you're using iconography in a functional way in an interface like this, the thickness of the individual strokes on the icons need to match up with the functional text that's nearest to it. So in this example, we have a medium weight font in the header, so we need a slightly thicker weight for the strokes in the iconography than we would otherwise. And finally, we'll add another visual separator here to distinguish the different parts of the user menu from one another. Now for the hero section, we want some big bold text right in the front here. This is the first thing that your eyes are going to go to when you visit this page. And it needs to explain the unique value proposition of YouTube Jobs very clearly. Now, although YouTube Jobs only showcases jobs that make sense for someone who's looking to hire for their YouTube channel, it's still quite a broad range of different services that you can source on the platform. So we're going to update the text to reflect this. And I wanted to communicate the breadth of different service offerings here in a way that didn't take up too much space, so I spent an absurd amount of time tediously animating keyframes on this text here so that it would type through various different word categories and hopefully get the point across that pretty much anything you need for your channel is available here. The body text and call to action buttons will remain the same, but for the secondary call to action, we're just going to use a nice outline stroke instead of the desaturated red because this implies that it's clearly secondary to the primary button, and using less color overall lets us be much more intentional about where the user's attention goes. To the right of the text, we want to include some sort of visual explanation of the unique value proposition for YouTube Jobs. The image is okay, but I think we can do a little better. So we'll have a picture of both an editor and a scriptwriter alternating between one another with a little bit of design flair in cadence with the typed text here on the left. I think this does a really good job to emphasize the people behind the service in a way that also explains the unique value proposition of the service as a whole. Now this section is looking a little bit bland for a hero, so we'll add a cheeky little gradient behind the hero image here. And finally, we'll add another control to the header so that we can swap between a light and dark mode on demand. Very nice. I really like this trusted creator section just below the hero here, but there's 2 problems with this. First, it's centered and everything else on the page is left aligned, so it feels a little jarring. And second of all, I don't know why I can interact with this. Are you really expecting me to click on these tiny little dots? I would hope not. The navigation dots are supposed to communicate that there are a lot of creators that work through YouTube Jobs. So we can achieve that same effect by first left lining everything and then displaying all the creators in a long line off to the right, and then implying that the list goes on even further by fading the list on the right into the background a little bit. Now, the current site features jobs first, and I want to emphasize the talent a little bit more here, because that's a win for both YouTube creators and the talent themselves. And like I said earlier, you can source talent for just about any skill set that's relevant to a YouTube channel through YouTube Jobs, but when I'm, as a YouTube creator, searching for someone, I'm usually looking for one specific skill at a time. Maybe I'm looking for an editor or a scriptwriter. So I'm going to need some way to filter all the talent by a particular category. If I only want to look at editors, I can do that too. But then that introduces another design problem. What should be the default selection here? And we can solve that quite simply by having an all skills badge that is by default selected when you first scroll into this section. Now for the talent cards themselves. The existing talent cards have a couple of usability problems. First, an individual provider's experience is not clear at all. I don't know who I'm dealing with when I'm looking at an individual card. I'd have to click through and look at their portfolio. There's also these little badges on the cards that don't really make a lot of sense to me. I can barely see the smiling, happy faces of the creators on the platform. So let's start over completely. First, we'll make the talent profile picture much bigger. Next, we'll get the basics out of the way by showcasing their name and their top skill. Then we'll show some kind of experience where I can get a feel for how many clients this person's had and how many projects they've completed. Again, we'll use the same heuristic we've been using throughout the site and add a little vertical separator line to imply that these are two distinctly separate statistics. We'll also add some social links so that prospects can click through and get to know these individuals a little more off platform. Now you might think that it's a bad idea to let someone click on a link that will take them away from your landing page if your goal is to get them to sign up for your service, but the reality of how people buy things is often quite messy. It's very rare that someone will just go to a landing page, scroll down and click on your call to action. They almost always go to other websites to corroborate things and come back. So this isn't a problem. Now we'll also have two call to actions here, one to view this person's profile and the other to just start chatting with them and see if they're a good fit for your project. And again, the button that we want them to click is heavily saturated, and the button that we want to de-emphasize is using that same pattern that we did in the header with a nice gray outline. And finally, if I'm hiring someone, I need to know if they're available for work. As a freelance designer myself, I often go through periods where I'm just completely booked up or on vacation and I can't take on new clients. So we'll use this little animated status icon that I think does a great job of pulling visual attention with a very subtle animation and just feels so much more delightful. If I saw something like this, I would just want to click it. It just makes this card seem so much more juicy than it did before. But now that the card's done, let's go ahead and pop 6 of these bad boys into this section, and then we will again imply that there's many more talented service providers with a subtle gradient and a button that says Browse All Talent. And now we're going to build out the section for recent jobs. So we'll copy the same design pattern for selecting between skills with these badges at the top, and then we'll build out the job card itself. Again, we'll start with the job title and description because they're essential. If we don't have these, we just don't know what this job's all about. These should be the first thing in the visual hierarchy. But we'll also add a tag for the skill type so that users can quickly and visually distinguish between jobs that are relevant for them. The main call to action will also be to look at the job details. Duh. But we'll also pop a link in there to report scam or spam jobs. This kind of stuff happens all the time on these big job boards. Now, other than the job title and description, there's some other really important metadata that I would use as selection criteria for finding a new job. And those are when this job was posted. If it's posted 2 years ago, I'm probably not going to want to engage. The number of other applicants. If there's 1,000 other applicants, my chance of my application being seen is very low, and I, again, just would like to skip this one. And the budget for the project. All of these things are extremely important selection criteria, so we're going to float them to the top of the card inside a little band of metadata. Now we're missing one key element here, and that's who posted this. Is this some titan like Mr. Beast, or is it some random unknown YouTube creator like Demystifying Design? We've got all this white space over to the right, so let's use that space for the job creator details. First, we need to know the channel name, and the channel avatar gives us a quick way to notice channels that we may be familiar with. It might also help to know the number of subscribers that a given channel has, so I can know if I'm qualified to help them at scale. I also want to know how many projects they've completed on the platform already and when they signed up. If they've been actively giving out work for the past 2 years, they're probably a serious buyer, and I'm going to be much more likely to engage with a project like that. Finally, I want to visit the channel to see what they're all about, and we'll put a little button here to make that possible. I really love this single job component, and in order to truly demystify the design here, I want to share several references that were used when building this out. Most notably, the job card from a site called Codable, which I use all the time to find WordPress design and development projects. And there'll be links in the descriptions to any of the design references I use, so you can go and follow those respective designers if you'd like. Now, if I was looking to hire or get hired, I would like to see if people have used this platform before or been hired through this platform before. I want to see some kind of social proof. So now we're going to build out a testimonial section. Kind of crazy that this doesn't exist on the current site today. We'll start with a definitely not AI generated review of YouTube jobs. And then we'll add a bit of credibility to the testimonial by picking out several statistics that are relevant to that creator. How many jobs have they funded in the past year? How many service providers have they actually worked with? Next, of course, we'll need to identify who wrote this testimonial, and we can just place an image to the right of the container here, and visually, it will make sense that the person on the right is communicating the testimonial on the left. This is the beauty of visual hierarchy, because we've named this section Success Stories, and then we have a large paragraph of text, which is obviously the story, and a picture on the right. This is the source of the story. Let's use our favorite YouTuber, Mark Rober again. Looking good, Mark. We'll show a couple of testimonials, so we'll need some kind of navigation, and we'll show where we are in this navigation by making that respective dot brighter, and add a little animated border that indicates how long the carousel is going to stay on that testimonial before moving to the next one. Next, we'll need a way to differentiate between the different kinds of testimonials on YouTube jobs. You've got testimonials from people that have hired someone on the platform, and testimonials from people that have been hired. The solution to this design problem is pretty simple. We'll just use a secondary nav here, and we'll imply that one of them is selected by increasing the opacity and adding a thick white stroke to the bottom side of the selected item. Finally, this is a lot of text to read. People don't read on the internet. It just doesn't happen. So we're gonna highlight the key takeaway from each testimonial with a nice, slightly darker blue background. All right, now for the footer. So if a user has got this far, they're probably somewhat interested in hiring someone or getting hired on the platform. So we're gonna hit them with another call to action with some text that's designed to get them to click these buttons. We'll use the same two call to actions from the hero section. We don't want to bamboozle users by changing them at this point. And then we'll add the footer links here and distinguish the section headers by making them slightly larger and a slightly heavier font weight. Whenever I'm building out a footer like this, I always change two attributes for the section headers versus the links themselves, and that usually sends a signal that this is the title and these are the links. Then we'll just add some simple branding and social links and the copyright details in the footer. And that's it. I truly think that these design changes would make the YouTube Jobs website better at doing its own job, getting people to sign up for the service. But let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see some more juicy redesigns, there's a playlist right here ready for you to binge. See you next week, guys.